The massive Lilac Hills development planned for the rural backcountry violates the county's own growth plan. Plans for an upscale shopping center on the shores of a Carlsbad lagoon have environmentalists up in arms. And there are luxury hotels all over the waterfront, but a little-known requirement for low-cost lodging has doomed plans for 3 more on Harbor Island. I'm Mark Sauer. The KPBS Roundtable starts now. Welcome to our discussion of the week's top stories. I'm Mark Sauer. And joining me at the KPBS Roundtable today, our reporter Andrew Keats of Voice of San Diego. Hi, Andy. It's good to see you back again.
How you doing, Mark?
And KPBS North County Bureau Chief Allison St. John. Hi, Allison.
Hello, Mark.
Glad to have you. And Lori Weisberg, who covers tourism for the San Diego Union Tribune. Hi, Lori.
Hi, good to see you.
It's great to have you back. Well, it violates county's growth plan. It lies in the heart of wildfire country, and first responders warn it's too remote to reach in an emergency. So why is the development known as Lilac Hills on the verge of being approved in the backcountry near Valley Center? Andrew, start with giving us the size, the scope. What kind of development are we talking about here?
Sure. So it's about 600 acres of various parcels. Most of it's this very typical of that part of the county, rolling hills, mostly avocado farms, citrus farms, that sort of thing. And they're going to put about 1,700 homes there, some retail components. It's going to end up having school, all the stuff that would come with a development of that size.
All right, so a village of 5,000 people, 1,700 homes, you say, built in a fairly remote area. Now, how does this fit in with the county's growth plan, which wasn't passed that long ago?
Yeah, no, it doesn't, and that's what makes this such an amount of heartache for everybody. Is that they just passed this growth plan 4 years ago, and this is just not part of it. This is zoned to be agricultural land and was just recently zoned to be agricultural land. Mostly when you hear about these sorts of major general plan amendments, like with One Paseo and Carmel Valley, you could at least say, well, yeah, it doesn't fit with the plan, but the plan's 30 years old. It didn't contemplate what the situation we have today. This is just not the case here. This is exactly what was contemplated.
It's up to date and ready.
And they were aware of this plan coming through at the time that the update happened.
Okay.
So and I should say that at the time that they initiated this project and they submitted it initially, the county's planning department at the time just rejected it out of hand and said, we don't even recommend getting going down this path. It's so far outside the realm of our old plan and the new plan that we're working on, we might as well reject it. Since then, they've got new leadership in that department. They renamed it, and now they are basically sitting in a position where they're going to recommend and say that that the Board of Supervisors should approve it.
And we're going to get into what politics and all that behind that. Allison, I wanted to ask you, in your story, you mentioned the leapfrog development. What's that?
Okay, that's very easy to understand. It's the idea of a new development sort of landing plop in the middle of, as Andy says, a rural area. So it's leapfrogging over. Instead of being close to existing infrastructure like Valley Center, where the plan calls for growth to happen, it's kind of jumping off into rural areas. And that's one of the things that specifically the general plan was designed to prevent. It was laid out very clearly in the general plan.
And what are some of the other problems here that they have to, this development will have to address if it moves forward?
Yeah, so I mean, one big one is that the local fire district says at the farthest reaches of the project, keep in mind 600 acres, so it's a very big project, that they say they're not going to have any problem reaching within. The county has a standard 5 minutes. You need to be able to reach somebody in the event of an emergency. They said they're not going to have any problem reaching the first phases of development, but by the end, those people, they currently can't reach them within 5 minutes. So they're going to need to figure out a new station. Right now, but the problem is there's this gap in the meantime where they say there's not going to be enough tax revenue from the project until 10 years later to pay for the station. And the developer has said, we're not going to give you any more money. You're going to get plenty of money in upfront fees and eventually tax revenues. So there's this question of, well, how do we make this happen? And what the county's resolved to do is say, well, we can let you get started building now, and you'll just have to figure that out later. Never mind the fact that there's been almost a decade of wrangling over this issue that they haven't been able to resolve.
Okay, so that's to come then, as it were. Tell us about the developer. You said in your story that these folks don't take no for an answer. Yeah,
they're called accretive investments, and I used as an example that we started our story with the Hernandez family. It's a family, they've owned property right in the middle of where this development is since the 60s. And they also happen, as part of that property, they own a little road that they reach their property through. About a year ago, a creative came to them and said that they'd like to acquire the right-of-way for that road. The family rejected it and said, we're not interested in that. And then a year later, they heard from a creative again, and this time it was with a lawsuit that said, turns out your leaky septic tank is polluting a creek that runs through both of our properties. Problem is there's no water in the creek.
It's dry.
It is dry, and the people that live there say it's been dry as long as they can remember.
Lori?
Well, you know what I find fascinating, going back to the county general plan, I mean, I remember myself covering that general plan update years ago. So finally, after all this money, all this time spent, and then one really big project comes along, and wham, they're ready potentially
to violate the plan.
Violate this plan, and let's say they do. Let's say it does go forward, and it does. Then you've set this sort of dangerous precedent. Anything that comes along, well, we can find a little loophole, a little exception, or a big exception for any major development, and then is your general plan just worthless document?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it raises the question: why spend all this time and political capital and energy and money and actual taxpayer money to update these plans if you don't even honor them?
Right, Allison.
And, you know, it all does come down to money, and the reason that they bought that land is because it's pennies on the dollar in terms of the cost, right? But I wonder, is it really worth it? They are spending so much on, you know, lobbying people, and now they're going to have to fight probably in court, and so much time. You'd sort of wonder whether these developers wouldn't find that it's actually more efficient just to go with the plan and build where they're supposed to build.
It's funny you say that. After all the weeks I've spent researching this, I've got this constant tabulation going where I'm just like, how is this the more lucrative way to do this? I mean, 1,700 homes, sure, but I mean, now granted, they're smart people. Obviously it is, or else they wouldn't do it. But yeah, no, I mean, they have spent no small cost making this happen.
Well, we've got a good bite that goes right to this point, and this is from Steve Hitchison with the developer. Let's hear what he has to say.
If you look at land like is behind me here, it sells for much less, maybe $20,000, $30,000 an acre, somewhere in that neighborhood. If you get into the community centers, well, everybody knows it's going to be higher density and consequently more expensive, and it could be up, you know, over $250,000, maybe up to $500,000 an acre.
I misspoke there. He's not with the developer. He's against that plan. So what about his point he's making there?
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's exactly, that is the model of this development is find cheap land, initiate a political process to upzone the development rights of that land. If you run into a roadblock, if you run into a rule that says you can't do something, you change the rule or you look for a loophole around that roadblock, and then you just keep pushing at all costs. And that's exactly what they've done.
Now, there's some political intrigue here going on, too. We've got some money that supported some politicians, supported some folks running in the fire district, which is normally kind of an obscure race. Explain what I'm talking about here.
Yeah, so they spent, I mean, just huge amounts of money.
They being the developer.
The developer donated to a political action committee that made some donations to a fire district board, for instance. The developer donated about $40,000 to that political action committee. Now, all of the fire districts in the entire county combined, every candidate raised about $13,000 in that same election.
So a lot of money relative to the race.
You know, they've got years and years of donations going back to Supervisor Ron Roberts, Supervisor Bill Horn, small amounts to Supervisor Cox, and you know they've basically just recognized that there's going to be a certain group of people that are going to make decisions on this development ultimately, and it's worth it to support them.
All right, and Supervisor Horn may have to step back from this vote. Tell us about that.
So he owns 30 acres nearby. It's not adjacent, and in fact, to the letter of the FPPC regulations, he is outside the area that constitutes a clear and direct conflict of interest. However, those rules say, you know, if there's a reasonably foreseeable way that you could personally benefit from a decision that you make, you shouldn't be able to vote. Now, the reasonable and foreseeable situation here is if you put 1,700 homes and 5,000 people in this part of Valley Center, this has just become your population center. Forget the general plan, you've just switched it. Now this is the village center for Valley Center, and so then all the properties near there become development opportunities.
Up in value. A couple seconds left. When are they likely to vote? Where are we in the process?
It's going to happen this fall, likely, so it'll September 11th, I think it'll go to the Planning Commission, and then maybe a month after that it'll go to the Board of Supervisors.
And maybe a lawsuit, who knows?
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Well, Voters in Carlsbad may have thought it would be strawberry fields forever when they voted to preserve 2,003 acres fronting the Agua Hedionda Lagoon. The fields are a familiar sight driving north on Interstate 5, but now an upscale mall could rise there amid all those strawberries. Allison, give us an overview of this 8515 development. What does that mean, first of all?
Okay, so the 8515 refers to really the way the developer is selling the project, which is that it's 85% going to preserve 85% of that 200-acre plot as open space, and then the 15% is where the actual retail shopping center is going to be. So the strawberry fields, in fact, will remain, and this is part of the selling point, is that Carlsbad loves its strawberry fields, and they will remain. They'll be moved a little bit further east, but really, I think what's interesting about this is we know a lot more about that 85% than we do about the 15%, which is actually the development.
Okay. Well, now tell us where exactly this mall is going to be, and it's going to be anchored by a Nordstrom's, and give us an idea. They say it's really kind of different. Right?
Well, yes. I mean, I must say, I think some people are very excited about this. The developer, Caruso Affiliated, has built almost a dozen, not malls, shopping centers, shopping, dining, and entertainment centers, he likes to call them, in Southern California, and many of them are very unique and upscale, and some people feel like that will be a great thing to bring it to San Diego. It will be anchored by Nordstrom's. It's just off Cannon Road. This is if it is approved. Mm-hmm. And I think here the question is, there's a lot of people who are in support of this, but I think what the question is there room to address the problems that the community has with this project? Because the way that it's being presented is different. That's what's setting a precedent here.
All right. Well, we've got a bite right to that point here. We're segging so nicely here today. This is Bryce Ross, Vice President for the Development. Let's hear his bite.
Something that's really unique that represents what Carlsbad is all about. A great place to spend time with friends and family, low buildings, great character, a lot of community events for the community to come together, like movies in the park, concerts in the park, Mommy and Me, yoga in the park.
Yoga in the park, what's not to like? That sounds great. Why
Yes.
are people upset?
Yes, I think that the developer has done a great job of actually going out and selling this to certain members of the community, not all of them. A lot of people were caught by surprise by this. And it is being sold as being something, a concept, sort of a lifestyle concept. That's very much his approach to development, is not the buildings, but this kind of almost like a film set, that he's going to build where you would be happy to spend your afternoon and spend a bit of money.
Nordstrom land.
Right, but there are no renderings of this thing at all. I mean, I remember when we were talking about One Paseo, there were at least some drawings so you could get a sense of what it would look like. The opponents have actually taken what little detail there is to, architectural drawers who've said we cannot produce a rendering of this development based on the information in this report. So it's all very conceptual at this point, which I think is why people are concerned about voting on something which, once you've voted on it, that's it. It's not the same as a California environmental report where you can go in, tweak things you don't like. It's like, here it is, folks. Either you take it or you don't.
I was going to ask you about that, because they deliberately want this to be part of an initiative process so they don't have to do a formal EIR. And
That's an environmental report, of course.
Yes, environmental impact report.
It's into loud jargon.
Yes. And then I think I read in your story that, they make the counter argument, but we pages and pages of documents on environmental assessment. But does it really measure up to the level of an environmental impact report? And so couldn't they, this is clearly they think that there's a reason why maybe it couldn't pass muster with an EIR. Otherwise, why would they do this?
Well, this is what makes this project so interesting, because I think a lot of people are unhappy with CEQA, with the California Environmental Quality Act, and some people say that it's been abused by people who have used it to oppose projects endlessly. So this is almost an experiment by this developer to be using this citizens' initiative, whereby he's collected, 15% of the voters in Carlsbad, their signatures, which forces it to the ballot, and once it's on the ballot, you can say yes or no, and that, but because of a Supreme Court ruling just last year, means he doesn't have to go through CEQA.
Yeah, that's what's so interesting about this, right? Is that you got the Supreme Court last year rules that this is a perfectly valid way to get around using CEQA, and now you got this coming, and it's pretty. We've talked to some people that said, this is going to happen. Developers aren't silly. They get this opportunity, they're going to do what they can to get around it.
Well, not everybody thought that the petition was exactly honest. We've got a bite from environmentalist Diane Nygaard. Let's hear what she says.
People signed the petition thinking that they were saving the strawberry fields. They have done that time and time again over the years. What the signature gatherers forgot to tell them is that there's a 585,000 square foot shopping center attached to what they thought was saving the strawberry fields. They didn't mention that.
So she got a point there?
Yes, I think this is really the message for all of us, discussing this, which is that when you see a citizens' initiative, someone collecting signatures, it's really important to read it, because in this case, people thought in many cases that it was just to preserve the strawberry fields. And of course, the strawberry fields were already preserved under a previous proposition in 2006. And they thought that it meant that it would be it would go up for a vote. And they thought, we'll get to vote on it. In fact, it will go to a vote, but it could be just the city council just deciding next week we'll go for it, and it could not go to the public again at all.
Right, so lay that out clearly now. So the council's going to take this up, and what are the two ways they could go with it?
Yeah, well, next Tuesday that's what they're going to have to decide, is will they go with it? And I know that Carlsbad City Council has been waiting for a developer to fill this particular space for a long time, and they like this developer and they like the project. They've analyzed the developer's 4,000-page environmental report and say it's as good as CEQA. But the opponents say, no, there are many things, there's traffic, there's environmental impacts that they've really underestimated. We want to have more power to make some tweaks and changes so that it really fits our community. And if you just go ahead and vote on it, we won't have any power to do that.
But now what they will likely say, if in fact they go this way, is by us approving it now saves the city the amount of money needed to put it to the citizens for a vote.
And that is also really interesting, because it will cost the city of Carlsbad almost $500,000 to put it to the vote. The developer said at the beginning, this project is not going to cost the taxpayers a penny. But he neglected to say, well, it might cost them $500,000 if, in fact, it has to go to the ballot. And he's not offering to pay for that.
And this signature gathering thing is something we just see all the time, right? Like every major issue that goes to a citizens' initiative ends up coming to a point where people say, I signed, but I didn't know what I was signing.
And they pay the gatherer, so there's an incentive there to kind of spin to get the signature, right?
Yeah. I mean, one Paseo got really ugly with the signature gathering, and competing signature gatherings and deceptive signature gatherings, and Barrio Logan had some really ugly
Whereas
encounters.
when you go through the California Environmental Quality Act, it may be long and arduous, and everyone admits that it is, but at least you have a process which has been worked over the years to work, where people can submit their comments and those get addressed, and a lot of projects really are changed before they get finalized as a result of community input. In this case, there really isn't an opportunity. The community input has already been gathered, according to the developer.
All right.
Outreach.
A couple seconds left in this segment. If the council does go ahead and greenlight this thing, when might we see this? We won't call it a mall, a shopping center, a concept. When might we see it?
I'll call it a mall.
Be built. Okay.
Well, I was just reviewing the interview with Rick Caruso back in May when he first announced this, and he said, I like to do things right, but I like to do things fast. And if this is approved, we'll break ground in 6 months. We'd like to see it open in 18 months. 17, 18, 2018.
We'll be out there doing 19. Downward dog and the yoga classes before you know it. All right, there is more news concerning development, or rather lack of development this week. The Coastal Commission last week rejected plans for up to 3 luxury hotels on Harbor Island. The reason? A lack of affordable, low-cost lodging along the water. Now, if I were a betting man, I'd wager very few Californians know about this provision in our laws. Lori, explain what this is all about and what this provision is they're leaning on.
Yeah, and I'm wondering why we all don't know about it, including myself, until recently, because it has been in the Coastal Act since 1976. No kidding. They've been working on this. So, but more recently, they've been holding a lot of workshops among themselves, because they realize, we've had this policy around, this mandate, for so many decades, and we're not really producing what we think we should be producing. Ultimately, hotel developers do not want to build low-cost lodging. So what they've been doing, the default position has been to pay an in-lieu fee. And so they've collected millions of dollars, about 19 million, but about 10 million are unspent. And it's time, they think, these coastal commissioners, to get going on doing something that's going to produce more lodging.
Now, is this 19 million up and down the coast?
Yes, this is up and down the coast. And while things have gotten done, like hostels and RV parks, and nothing in San Diego.
Ah, okay. Now, what were the origins? What's the whole idea behind low-cost housing by the beach?
So we all know that the Coastal Act is all about preserving access to the water, and part of that thinking was that you also deserve to have overnight access to the water. And it originated when they were forming the Coastal Act. It originated with the trend of a lot of high-cost lodging, condos, apartments, taking away those kind of low-cost traditional motels. So that's why they put that into the Coastal Act.
All right. And how pricey is it, I mean, to stay, say, pick a general...
the Ritz-Carlton? No.
Well, all right, I grant you there's a range, but you'll spend $300 or more a night, will you not?
Yeah,
to be on the water in San Diego?
Even an economy or mid-scale hotel that may be inland is going to be way higher because it's near the water. So yeah, it's probably closer to $300.
And so what is this provision from the Coastal Commission? What does it realize, like $100 or cheaper a night down by the water?
Well, and that's the issue.
Because they're vague about that, aren't they?
Yeah, and 5 years after the Coastal Act was written and approved, there was a legislation that said, Coastal Commission, you cannot set hotel rates. You can't set them, and you can't income qualify people. It's kind of like we know it when we see it, sort of affordable lodging. But so that what they've done is they've gone to inherently affordable things like hostels because they know those are affordable.
Okay.
So I mean, it sounds very similar to the efforts to try to get affordable housing. That the developers almost always just opt for just paying a token fee if they don't build the housing. And so the Coastal Commission is now saying, we want you to actually. Do they actually want the hotel developers to present a project? Or what?
Well, ideally, I think they'd like to see it nearby or on the same site.
Or rooms part of their own development site.
Yeah, but I think realistically they know there's not going to be rooms within a motel or hotel set aside, much like you see with affordable lodging or even on the same site. It's not going to work that way. So they want they want a wider array of things that will actually get done.
So is it more the Port District that will have to come up with a plan? Not the developer, perhaps, but the Port District that might say, we'll take that money and do something else down the coast.
In this case, what we were talking about, what the issue was with the Port District, they wanted the port to set aside some part of this land on the eastern end of Harbor Island for some form of affordable lodging, or if you can't, find another site. And the port right away wasn't willing to do that right away. They're doing a study, and that study may not be done until 2018.
So tell us about these 3 hotels here that got rejected here just recently now. Where were they exactly? And as you say, not likely they're going to build some low-cost units there on that same site. There's 500 rooms, but it'd probably be divided up into 3 hotels. One is ready to go. It's a 175-room hotel that's more upscale. On Harbor Island, near the water.
On the eastern end of Harbor Island, near a marina that's already there.
That's all, of course, over by the airport, and we know where that is.
Yeah, and there's no plan for the rest of those hotels, what they would be. The port said, well, we'll do mid-scale economy maybe down there, the other hotel rooms, and the Coastal Commission said, we don't even know if that'll be affordable. We doubt it.
Okay. Now, explain how these fees are collected to fund these low-cost beach lodgings.
So when they can't develop something, when they try to develop something that doesn't work, it's been kind of all over the map, but generally it's been about equivalent to about 25% of the total rooms at about $30,000 a room.
Okay. And what's happened to all this money? You mentioned $19 million was collected overall, is that right? And
yeah, so some of about half of it has gone to hostels in Santa Monica, restoring funky kind of cabins in Crystal Cove overlooking the water, RV parks, but no like separate rooms, no separate motel, just for affordable lodging.
It does seem like just saying we'll do a study does seem a little bit like an out, doesn't it? I mean, if you've got, did you say 7 or 8 million is just for San Diego, or is that around the Bay?
So recently there have been some hotels approved on Lane Field and Liberty Station, and collectively those hotels were assessed fees of about $7 million, mostly for Lane Field, and so. But no way to spend the money right now, no plan exactly.
So it's just sitting there collecting what little interest it can.
And I don't even know if they've actually paid it. It's probably they're probably close to paying it. But there's 10 million that has been sitting there.
And no one's even come up with a proposal of like, here's a little plot of land, maybe we could, nothing specific at all.
Probably it's germinating, and the money doesn't sit with the Coastal Commission. It goes to things like the Coastal Conservancy, the State Parks Department, and then they're supposed to figure out a way to spend
I mean,
money.
you can imagine the nightmare of this. I mean, the Housing Commission has a hard enough time spending their money, and they've got this entire apparatus of federal and state grants that make it easier, and an entire private industry that exists expressly to build affordable housing using these public sources. For this, it's like, you know, none of that stuff exists, and it's like they're collecting this money with seemingly no real idea of how to ever get it out the door.
Yeah, I know, and I think one commissioner though at the Coastal Commission meeting said for the port, said, you know, this isn't rocket science. You've got the land, do it. It's empty. So,
yeah.
So Port Commission, you should be able to figure this out.
So is that going to happen anytime soon? We've got a few seconds left.
We're waiting for the port to come back and make up their mind with it. They're going to consult the commission and decide how to revisit this. But the developer wants to move ahead with that hotel.
So he wants to move ahead, but it's all in limbo until we hear back from the Port Commission.
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm sure you'll be following this and
Yeah.
enlighten us even more on that. Well, that does wrap up another week of stories at the KPBS Roundtable. I'd like to thank my guests, Andrew Keats of Voice of San Diego, Allison St. John of KPBS News, and Lori Weisberg of the San Diego Union Tribune. A reminder, all the stories we discussed today are available on our website, kpbs.org. I'm Mark Sauer. Thanks for joining us today on the Roundtable.